Our next speaker is a cybersecurity evangelist who has over 16 years of multi-industry experience. In his current role as CTSO, he is an avid customer advocate and helps customers globally to make the best out of their cybersecurity investments. Please welcome CTSO and Regional VP and Managing Director for India of Qualys Incorporated, Mr. Jyotiprakash.
In 1999, we launched the first ever SaaS security solution. Since then, we've been diligently expanding our cloud platform, one IT, security, and compliance app at a time. The result: one integrated cloud-based platform for IT, security, and operations. Today, we extend the unifying power of our cloud platform to EDR. We hope you'll give us a look.
Hello and welcome. My name is Deb and I work with Qualys as a VP for Asian countries. Welcome to ISOG, and I'm hoping you are enjoying it so far. So in the next 30 minutes, of which I of course want to keep at least 5 minutes for responding to questions, if any, but in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to speak on a non-technical topic for today. But this topic does outweigh a lot that we plan, implement, and do around cybersecurity. So my topic is about hacking the board metrics around cybersecurity. And I'm speaking today mostly about what really happens in the board to executive communication. So it's going to be about elevating the board communication for CISOs and what really happens. I have, towards the end of my presentation, a couple of examples when I interviewed the CISOs around what the board expects from them, from really large companies. So, of course, the board, wants to hear CISOs discuss how they are managing investments and operations in cybersecurity. Technology and cybersecurity is the third most important topic for boards today. Just exactly, just right behind corporate strategy and the CEO office. So this is actually according to the JWC Partners 2021 survey with board of directors, many of them. From a CISO standpoint, yes, the CISO does Google for how to impress the board, right? Well, this is all about critical thinking around improving executive communications. So during board meetings, CISOs have precious moments to explain really complex issues and provide data so that those who are concerned about all the corporate risk that can take this information into consideration, right? And appropriate decisions will be made for business, enabling the business. Remember that the board looks at the CISO as someone who empowers the business to take risk. Okay, so let's look at what isn't working currently with board communication. What are the actions the board wants to take? What are the metrics around security that can be fed to the board to help them with this decision making? And what does the board really seem to care about or appreciate of? And finally, we will also look at what metric is the most valuable to the board. So giving the true picture to the board is what is minimally expected of any C-suite leader. In a very recent survey, globally 86% of the survey respondents believed that their organization may be breached in the next 12 months. The top 5 cyber threats in APAC specifically include things like ransomware, watering hole attacks, advanced persistent threats, malicious insiders, and fileless attacks. According to a recent McKinsey survey, over 90% of executives across the world are facing a digital skill gap, in their workforces. This is particularly blight of the APAC region, where a majority of workforces are actually employed by small and medium enterprise. These SMEs have tended to put off digitization efforts in the past years, perhaps due to the misconception that such a shift would entail high costs. From security engineers to CISOs to even IT technicians, the shortage is one of the reasons why companies feel they are vulnerable to cyber attacks. While there, of course, are managed service providers that can help with some security, businesses still feel it's insufficient for them to fully protect their company. By almost every account, trend, or metric, an industry as a whole, we are actually spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year in cybersecurity globally. So, yeah, my slide does say dumbing it down. So communicating effectively with the board can make or break a security program. Organizations have multiple stakeholders, all of whom do always have a varying level of cybersecurity knowledge and interest. As a CISO, you need to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of the cybersecurity solutions that you have employed with regards to each stakeholder's area of expertise at times. Now, from a technical standpoint, you know the primary KPIs for proving effective cybersecurity, and controls monitoring. KPIs include things like, mean time to detect, mean time to resolve, mean time to contain, the patching cadence, or the vendor risk management, right? Now, however, translating these technical data points into management level metrics becomes very challenging when you are reporting into the board, and the board does not understand this. So instead of giving long explanations with technical details, you can provide at a glance visibility, right, into your continuous cybersecurity monitoring efforts, consistent ratings across all factors, and a brief explanation of how these things translate into business imperatives such as financial or reputation risk. And this can give your board the information necessary to make strategic decisions. Of course, it is not easy to communicate cybersecurity to a board. High chances that the board has members coming from a non-IT background, but this is the wrong way of looking at it. Now, cybersecurity is a critical business issue which impacts operations, finance, the brand perception, and everything. But to make that clear to people without that knowledge, you need a compelling brief that shows them how cyber threats affect the aspects of businesses that they understand, right? The why, what, and how of protecting, and what matters to them from the dangers you understand. The why, is to usually show your board that cybersecurity is important. You need to make it relevant to their area of operations. The simplest, most direct, and the most affecting way of doing that. So tell them stories, show them real life examples of what a cyber breach does to an institution like yours, or highlight the knock-on effect of failure in cybersecurity has on businesses or livelihoods and reputation of business. Point them to the impact of a high-profile breach, right? Or maybe make it relevant by giving them an example from your own industry, right? But yes, cybersecurity is a necessity. It's also a selling point, a brand position, a marketable function of the business. Many banks proudly flaunt that they are security certified with PCI and this and that, right? So it's a way of proving that you care about protection and privacy of your customers. Now, to illustrate the what to the board, now cybersecurity is definitely a boardroom issue for the sake of the business as a whole. Now, directors in the board need to know at the very least what kinds of attacks are really out there, right? They don't need to keep up with the latest news. That's your job as a CISO. But they need to know the difference between a DDoS and a malware, so that you don't have to explain them these things every time that you meet. Explain how cybercrime is actually organized crime. It is professional. It is high frequency. It is state sponsored at times, and there are major consequences on the line. So put the responsibility on the company to protect sensitive and personal data in the course of day-to-day business, right? So it is just not an IT problem. You know it, I know it, but it's a finance problem. It can be a legal problem. It can be an operational problem. So you need to convey this to the board. Now, when you talk about the where, right? This is the part where board needs to understand what they can do. So their role is to set the culture from the top, right? Boards need to understand and ensure that the CEO makes cybersecurity a priority, setting regular training and education to the workforce entirely. Now, boards exist to keep tabs on senior leadership team, and they are the guardians of business performance who will ensure best practices being followed everywhere, right? So this is why it may not be easy to communicate cybersecurity to a board, but is a necessary evil, so you must do it. Now let's look at communication style. Cyber threats are enacted by people. The solutions are also human. So you definitely need great technology. But it doesn't work on its own, right? So if people in leadership positions do not understand how to keep the business safe, then no one will. The loopholes will be left open, and the breaches that will happen will be much worse when it comes. But the good news is they can be encouraged, to understand, as long as they are briefed the right way. So this isn't a place for your technical details. Keep it simple and have a clear takeaway, a solution to every problem you present. Now here's what malware is. This is what we do about it, right? 2 paragraphs, not much. You can illustrate the problem if you want. Sometimes infographics sticks better to the mind. So what is the organization's cyber risk level? Now to convey this, the overall risk level, you should highlight both your organization's risk appetite and risk tolerance, right? Both these levels. Using these measurements, this will allow you to represent your organization's overall risk as it pertains to the cybersecurity performance. Now looking at what are the organization's top risks, right? Now when determining your organization's top risk, you need to evaluate the historical impact cyber threats have had on your company's bottom line. By looking at financial impact of successful attacks, you can create a quantitative risk analysis method and display top risks side by side. Now this will help you explain where risk is concentrated and which risk will require additional attention. Now let's look at how is the organization's risk posture trending. Is risk increasing or decreasing, right? To see which way your risk posture is trending, you should compare your cybersecurity performance to the organization's risk appetite. So evaluating how well your cybersecurity solutions uphold your risk appetite will give your board an idea of whether risk is increasing or decreasing. Is the organization's level of cybersecurity spending appropriate? Now this is interesting because determining whether or not you are spending enough money on cybersecurity can be difficult, as there is absolutely no way to quantify the financial loss from a cyber attack until it has occurred. So showing the ROI will influence your board's cybersecurity budget allocation and ensure that spending is done in a way that sustains your security capabilities. What is the cyber risk associated with new business prospect? Now, new business prospects provide an opportunity for growth to your organization, but can also introduce additional cyber risk. So, showing the board that you are doing, enough or your due diligence when it comes to identifying potential business opportunities, that the corporation or the company is exploring is also crucial. So, this also must go into the communication style, when you talk to the board. So what to say, right? So this is the final thing, what to say. So look at this small illustration, right? The CIO emails the CISO saying that the board of directors is meeting next week and they want to be briefed on cybersecurity, and you, the CISO, are on the agenda to speak. So what do you consider of this? A big opportunity or a high risk moment, right? So your big goal is what do you want the board to do, feel, or say after they have met you, right? So this is what decides what you will discuss with the board. Remember that this meeting is really not about you, right? Also eliminate all the acronyms they may not understand, right? So whatever you say or report, ensure that it's precise and concise, and that the message conveys how, right? How security is focused on protecting the business first, and that it's efficient and effective and is working. Make sure that you highlight business benefits and not security features of things that you have done. Now, most importantly, how everything in your plan is driving change and is demonstrating a lot of value. This is important. Now, if you are there meeting the board to request for something, then be as specific as possible, right? What are you requesting and why? Be it money, be it staff, be it an approval, or even a directive to the executive team. Make them understand cybersecurity is best done with an executive level sponsorship and participation, right? And of course, make sure that you align every effort done and every dollar spent to a business advantage. Small examples could include things like like our secure app development lifecycle reduces time to market for a new app and reduced software development costs by 20%, right? Or our threat and vulnerability management program has increased in coverage and quality, hence we have reduced the risk of potential downtime from ransomware significantly by 300%, right? So remember that they are there to look at you from a metrics for success. So what does not get measured does not get improved, right? So deliver some good news, of course, and I tell them how this good news is based on a previous approval that you took from them around a specific challenge, right? So this actually is a good thing to bring up in a communication with the board. Now let's look at what not to say. This is probably where your focus should be, right? So do not confuse the board. When the board is confused, they are not confident, right? No acronyms, no heavy cyber jargons. Show them the strategy and make it clear as possible. Make them understand the plan, the size of the risk, but do not scare them. Do not do new charts and new metrics from this flashy tool, from that flashy tool. Keep it simple, and remember that they do not always see the problems like you see, or they do not always see the problems in the form of dollars being spent, right? So understand when you are in a discussion mode and when you are in a presentation mode, right? Because listening will matter. So be someone who is taking feedback, in near real time. Yeah, so I put this slide, just to make it look like a simple illustration of you don't want this thing to happen, right? So don't end up doing this, if you are the CISO. So look at how step one here is the board is uncertain about a technology risk. The CISO is feeling uncertain about the board. The board is avoiding the CISO or is asking very few questions or minimal questions, right? And CISO knows that they are not interested, and the CISO guesses or gives the board what they ask for, but the CISO didn't want. And at the end, the board and the CISO discomfort cycle repeats every time they meet. Now, this is the last thing you want, right? Feedback that the board usually provides when they have met a CISO. I have compiled a few. They talk about how the CISOs don't speak our language and seem to be speaking a different language every month, right? They sometimes tell me CISOs are great, on talking about blood in the streets, but very weak on strategies how to avoid it. Or sometimes even board will talk about how they need a CISO not to think of the board as an ATM machine, right? So the CISO needs to know their business better. So he should also understand the business better, not just cyber risk. I even had a few board members tell about how the CISO made the sales pitch way too big in comparison to the request that he was making. So these are things that you would definitely want to avoid. Now let's jump in to some real world inputs that I have gathered by doing a tiny interview with a few companies. I actually received a lot of responses when I spoke to CISOs about what their boards are expecting, from them, and how does it really go in that meeting. So this is an example from a CISO of a very large company with 300,000 employees and 100 billion in market capital. So this is what he says. He says, give a clear view about your state of cybersecurity and its impact to the organization. Give them a true picture and not a story. See that? So he says the board must feel assured that the CISO is in charge and is leading the way. And of course, like I even spoke about a couple slides back, don't be too technical, right? Just the business view, quantify the risk, and be short. Respond a question if they ask. Also, don't give them surprises and share every info that's 100% validated, right? And also, the board wants the CISO to educate them with all things cyber. You expecting them to differentiate between an exploit and a malware probably is too much to ask for sometimes. And what not to say. Never say you are 100% secure. Never say, even if the atmosphere gets lighter, give the important message. Do not say things that they don't want to know, right? And of course, be composed and guarded. You're not facing the devil. You're facing people who, are on your side. Then I also spoke to another CISO of an organization with 170,000 employees, and it's a very popular car brand in Europe. This is what he says. He says, ensure that business strategy, value proposition, key objectives, and priorities are considered, right? See, what does the board want to hear in your briefing, and what defines success for the CISO can be really, really very different from an organization to organization, right? So in a cybersecurity strategy, cyber risk is business risk. Hence, explain things like risk exposure, quantification of business impact, if risk event takes place at all, or the likelihoodness of something to happen, right? Right size investment and actions to mitigate the risk and things like that. Now, success is when cyber risk assessment and management are an integral part of the company's GRC, right? So he also speaks about what not to say. He says, if asked, don't avoid to take position with business acumen. This is good, right? Like, if you were the CEO, what would you do? Right? That's a good question to ask a CISO. Don't give them the impression to offload the cyber risk matter on the board. That means, show leadership and tell them you are in charge. Something very similar lines with the CISO that I had on the last slide, right? Avoid putting the board in unrealistic situation where everything should be done. Like, see, you really can't do everything. You have to probably do everything, but one after the other. You might have to prioritize your projects, right? And things like that. And never use technical jargons. Instead, use analogies, metaphors, images. This is something that we, of course, spoke about in my slides. I think I might have another example. Yeah, this is an example of a CISO of an organization with 270,000 employees, and they are a large French MNC in technology and consulting. So the board is listening to what is happening in the external world. That means a press report, latest in cybersecurity incident, and how much are we protected. The board is listening to how we are placed when compared to our competitors, like cybersecurity benchmark, right? Cybersecurity risk score, which is probably sometimes designed internally, and how business units are placed on the score, right? So score will of course consist of things like audit, training, phishing test simulation report, and things like that. And of course, third-party risk assessment, like supply chain risk to your vendors, how many vendors are in scope, how many have been assessed already, and how many actually show up a risk on the risk heat map, right? So success for CISOs, is also all around improvement in KPIs, improvement in cybersecurity projects progress, right? Also making sure that there is no non-conformities in external audits like ISO, PCI, or a SOX audit, right? And of course, it should be all resulting in customer wins. When I asked him what not to say, he says, never say that you are completely secured and there is no risk, right? And absolutely never do, FUD, that is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I actually interviewed a lot of CISOs, but in the interest of time, I have covered the feedback, what I've received from, 3 of these large companies, CISOs at large companies in my examples. Yeah. So with this, we are at the end of my talk today. Thank you, ISOG, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you, audience, for listening. You have been a wonderful audience. Let's see if there are questions. I'll be happy to take questions if any, on the Q&A window. Thank you.